My daughter texted me at 5:40 in the morning. Dad, change of plans. You're not coming to the lakehouse this weekend. Trevor's parents are staying there instead. The next afternoon, I called my accountant, pulled my name off the deed, and canceled the contractor I'd hired to finish their kitchen. When my daughter and her husband got home from their weekend away, the house they thought they owned had a for sale sign hammered into the front lawn. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 66 years old, and for 38 years I built and sold commercial refrigeration equipment out of a warehouse in Dayton, Ohio. Before I tell you exactly how I took back everything I'd given my daughter, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever had to teach someone you loved a lesson they didn't want to learn, hit like and subscribe, because you already know where this is going. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of gray Ohio sky that sits on the whole city like a lid. I was at my kitchen table with the newspaper I never read anymore, just holding it, the way you hold something familiar when the house is too quiet. My wife Carol had been gone 2 years that spring, pancreatic cancer. Fast, once it showed itself. The kitchen still had her handwriting on the calendar by the fridge, appointments and birthdays she'd never cross off now, and I hadn't had the heart to take it down. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from my daughter, Ashley, 32 years old, married 4 years to a man named Trevor Doyle, and the only family I had left in this world that still called me by name. I expected a good morning text, maybe a photo of my granddaughter. Instead, Dad, change of plans. You're not coming to the lakehouse this weekend. Trevor's parents are staying there instead. Sorry, it's just easier this way. I read it 3 times. The words didn't rearrange themselves into anything kinder. Let me explain what that lakehouse actually was, because it matters. 2 years earlier, right after Carol passed, I bought 60 acres on Indian Lake, about an hour north of Dayton, and I built a house on it. Not a cabin. A real house, 4 bedrooms, a boathouse, a dock I'd stood on with my own 2 hands hammering in the pilings even though I could have paid someone to do it. I paid $680,000 for the land and the build, every dollar from the sale of my company, and I put the deed in a living trust with Ashley named as the beneficiary. I told her the day I signed the papers, this is for you and your family, for the rest of your life, so that no matter what happens to me, you'll always have a place that's yours. I built it because Carol used to talk about a lake house every summer of our marriage, and we never once got around to it. Too busy. Too much work. I told myself I'd give my daughter what I never gave my wife. I wanted us, me, Ashley, Trevor, my granddaughter Lily, to spend every summer there together. That was the whole point. And now my daughter was texting me at dawn to tell me I wasn't welcome at my own gift, because Trevor's parents wanted it instead. I didn't feel my hands shake. That's the strange thing about 40 years running a business through 2 recessions and a warehouse fire that could have wiped me out. You stop reacting like a person who still has the luxury of panic. You get quiet. You get very, very quiet, and you start looking for the load-bearing wall that's about to give out. I called Ashley. It rang twice and went to voicemail. I called again. This time someone picked up, but it wasn't my daughter. Hi, Walter. Trevor's voice, smooth as a car salesman's. Which, funny thing, is exactly what he was before he found his true calling in real estate investing, a career I'd personally floated $40,000 into 2 years back, that he still hadn't paid a cent of back. Put my daughter on the phone, I said. She's getting Lily ready, Walter. Honestly, there isn't much to talk about. The lake house sleeps 6 comfortably, and with my folks driving all the way from Erie, it just made more sense for this trip to be a smaller group. That's a $680,000 house I built with my own money, I said, keeping my voice level, with your wife's name on the trust. You don't get to uninvite the man who built it. There was a pause, and I could hear a woman's voice in the background, not Ashley's, Trevor's mother. I'd learn later. Then Trevor came back smug, like he'd rehearsed this part. Look, Walter, no offense, but you've had a rough couple years. Ashley just thinks it'll be less stressful for everybody if this weekend's just young families. Kid stuff. You know how it is. We'll send you pictures. Less stressful for everybody. Young families. I sat there in Carol's kitchen with her handwriting still on the calendar, 66 years old, being told I was too much of a burden for a house I'd built with my own hands to honor a woman these 2 never even mentioned by name. I said one sentence. Enjoy your weekend, Trevor. And I hung up before he could hear anything else in my voice. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't pour a drink. though God knows I wanted to. I walked down the hall to what used to be my home office when I still ran the company, sat down at the desk, and opened my laptop. Because 38 years of running a business teaches you one unbreakable habit. When something doesn't add up, you don't get angry. You pull the paperwork. I logged into the joint checking account I still technically shared with Ashley from back when I helped her and Trevor get the real estate business off the ground. I hadn't looked at that account in months-old habit of trusting my own daughter. What I found stopped my coffee halfway to my mouth. 4 withdrawals in the last 6 weeks. $9,700. $9,600. $9,800. $9,500. All in cash. All from the same Fifth Third branch, 2 miles from their house. Every single one, under $10,000. I'm not a lawyer, but I ran a company for almost 4 decades, and I know exactly what that pattern means. Banks are required to report any cash withdrawal over $10,000 to the federal government. People who structure their withdrawals just under that number aren't buying furniture or paying off a credit card. They're moving money they don't want anyone official to notice. Nearly $39,000 in cash, quietly bled out of an account with my name still attached to it, timed over 6 weeks. And now, out of nowhere, I was being uninvited from a $680,000 house I'd built for my daughter by a son-in-law whose real estate business I'd personally bailed out, using his own parents as the excuse. Something was very wrong, and it wasn't about lakehouse sleeping arrangements. I picked up the phone and called the one person I trusted more than anyone left alive, Gerald Okafor, my attorney of nearly 30 years, the man who'd handled every contract, every lawsuit, every acquisition of my career, and the man who'd sat beside me at Carol's funeral without saying a word because he knew there was nothing to say. "Walter," he said when he picked up, "you sound like you did the day you found out your plant manager was skimming the payroll. I need you to look at something for me, Gerald. Today, if you can." I drove to his office on Main Street that same afternoon, a squat brick building he'd worked out of since before I sold my first refrigeration unit. Gerald was 71, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer who still wore a tie every single day, even though half his clients showed up in golf shirts. He listened to the whole story without interrupting the text message, the phone call with Trevor, the 4 structured cash withdrawals, his face going stiller and stiller the longer I talked. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath through his nose. "Walter, I want you to think back. 2 months ago, you told me Ashley asked you to see a doctor about your memory. You said you'd forgotten where you put your car keys twice in 1 week and she got worried." I remembered. I'd laughed it off at the time. "Everybody forgets where they put their keys. She asked you which doctor you usually see," Gerald continued, "and you told her Dr. Whitfield, your GP of 20 years. Do you remember who she then suggested you see instead? A specialist, someone named Dr. Renner, who she said her friend recommended." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I never went. I told her I'd think about it. "Walter," Gerald's voice dropped low, "I'm going to check something and I want you to sit there and not say a word until I'm done." He turned to his computer, and as a senior partner with access to the county's electronic court filing system, he was able to search pending petitions before they're formally served. His fingers moved across the keyboard, and I watched his jaw tighten the exact same way it had the day he told me my business partner of 15 years had been quietly forming a competing company behind my back. He turned the monitor toward me. "A petition for emergency conservatorship, filed in Montgomery County Probate Court. Petitioner, Ashley Doyle. Respondent, Walter Pruitt. Attached exhibit, a preliminary psychological evaluation from a doctor, Marcus Renner, stating I exhibited early indicators of cognitive decline consistent with the onset of dementia, based on a single unofficial consultation I had no memory of ever attending. The scheduled filing date was the following Monday. 2 days after my daughter and son-in-law were set to return from a lakehouse they'd told me I wasn't good enough to visit. I sat in that office chair and did the math out loud, because I needed to hear it in my own voice to believe it. Trevor's real estate deals had gone bad. I'd find out later just how bad. The $39,000 in structured cash wasn't for a vacation or a down payment. It was to pay a corrupt doctor for a diagnosis that didn't exist, and to retain a lawyer willing to file a fraudulent conservatorship the moment I was declared incompetent. A conservatorship that would hand my daughter, and by extension her husband, full legal control of every asset I had left. The lake house, my retirement accounts, Carol's life insurance payout, which I'd never touched. All of it. They weren't uninviting me from a weekend at the lake. They were removing me from my own life while I was still breathing, and they'd chosen this particular weekend, with Trevor's parents conveniently present as character witnesses to my supposed decline, to lay the final groundwork. Gerald asked me the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do, Walter?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about Carol, about the calendar on the kitchen fridge with her handwriting still on it, about the day I signed that trust and told my daughter it was hers for life, no matter what happened to me. I thought about how a man spends 4 decades building something so his child never has to struggle the way he did, and how that same child can look at everything you built and decide the fastest way to keep it is to erase you first. "Take it apart," I said. "All of it. Legally, quietly, and completely, before they get back Sunday night." Gerald didn't blink. He'd been waiting 30 years for a client who could actually stomach doing what needed to be done. Here's what most people don't understand about a revocable trust. Revocable means exactly what it says. I was still the grantor. Ashley was only the named beneficiary, not the owner, and I hadn't relinquished a single legal right when I set it up. That Thursday afternoon, sitting in Gerald's office, I signed the paperwork to dissolve the trust entirely and reclaim full personal ownership of the lakehouse. Friday morning, I listed it for sale with a cash buyer firm that specializes in fast closings, the kind that buy a property as is in under 2 weeks. No inspections, no negotiations. I authorized them to remove and donate every piece of furniture, every appliance, everything inside, to the local Habitat for Humanity restore before the closing walkthrough. I want to be clear about that part, because I know some of you would ask, and I wasn't about to let good furniture rot in a dumpster just to make a point. Give it to a family that actually needs it. That's what Carol would have wanted. Friday afternoon, I called the bank and closed the joint checking account, transferring every remaining cent into a new account in my name alone, one Ashley had never had access to. Friday evening, Gerald filed something of his own, a formal report to Montgomery County Adult Protective Services and a sworn affidavit denying any cognitive impairment, along with copies of the 4 structured cash withdrawals and a request that the district attorney's office review Dr. Renner's medical license for issuing a fraudulent diagnosis without an actual clinical evaluation. Elder financial exploitation isn't a private family matter in Ohio, it's a felony. By Saturday night, while my daughter and her husband were at my lake house, a house that, legally, was no longer mine to give and no longer theirs to inherit, a cash buyer had already signed a purchase agreement, and the closing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Sunday afternoon, they drove home from Indian Lake. I know the timeline because Ashley called me at 4:52 p.m., and I have never in my life heard my daughter's voice sound the way it sounded in that phone call. "Dad." Her voice was shaking, thin, panicked in a way I hadn't heard since she was 9 years old, and locked herself out of the house in a thunderstorm. "Dad, there's a for sale sign on the lawn. There's a lockbox on the front door. Our stuff, Dad. Where is all our stuff? What is going on? Did someone break in? Did someone rob us?" I sat at my kitchen table, in the quiet, with Carol's calendar still on the fridge, and I let her finish. "Dad, please, you have to call somebody. The bank just declined my card at the gas station. Trevor's card got declined too. Is this a mistake? Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Then what happened?" I took a slow breath, the same way I used to before walking into a room to lay off 80 people during the Fault 9 recession, because you don't get to feel the weight of what you're about to say. You just say it, clearly, so no one mistakes you for confused. Nothing happened to me, Ashley. I'm not confused, and I don't have dementia, no matter what doctor. Renner's paperwork says, what happened is that I found 4 cash withdrawals totaling $39,000 pulled from our joint account, structured specifically to stay under federal reporting limits. What happened is I found a conservatorship petition sitting in the Montgomery County court system with my name on it as the respondent and yours as the petitioner, scheduled to be filed 2 days from now. The silence on the other end was total. I could hear Trevor's voice faintly in the background asking what was wrong, and I could hear her not answering him. "I revoked the trust, Ashley. I sold the house. It closes Wednesday. Everything inside it went to Habitat for Humanity, so at least somebody's getting some good out of it. I closed the joint account and moved what was left into an account you'll never have access to again. And Gerald has already filed a report with Adult Protective Services, along with everything we found, including Dr. Renner's name." Dad, we can explain. You can explain it to the DA's office, if it comes to that. That's not my decision anymore. Gerald tells me structured cash withdrawals designed to hide a payment for a fraudulent medical evaluation is called elder financial exploitation, and it's a felony in this state, not a misunderstanding. Dad, please, we don't have anywhere to stay tonight. We don't have any money. The cards are frozen. You had a beautiful lake house this weekend, Ashley. Your husband's parents got to enjoy it. I hope it was everything you all wanted, because it was the last thing I was ever going to give either one of you for free. Please, Daddy. She hadn't called me that since she was maybe 12 years old, and for 1/2 of 1 second, something in my chest wanted to fold. But I thought of Carol's calendar, and I thought of a doctor's signature on a diagnosis I never received, and I let the feeling pass through me like weather. You stopped being someone I could trust the day you sat with your husband and decided the fastest way to secure your future was to have me declared incompetent while I was still very much alive to hear about it. I said, I love you. I will always love you, but I am not going to spend what's left of my life quietly waiting for you to file that paperwork. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down or throw it across the room. I set it gently on the kitchen table, next to the newspaper I still hadn't read, and for a long moment the house was as quiet as it had been every single day since Carol passed, except now the quiet didn't feel like grief. It felt like the first clean breath after finally setting down something heavy you'd been carrying without realizing how much it weighed. The closing on the lakehouse went through that Wednesday, exactly as scheduled. The cash buyer wired the funds the same day. I donated a portion of the proceeds to the local hospice organization that had cared for Carol in her final 6 weeks, because if there was one thing I wanted out of any of this, it was for something good to come from a place that had only ever been meant for good in the first place. Dr. Renner's medical board opened an investigation within the month, once Gerald's report and the county's own probate filing landed on the right desks at the same time. I heard, secondhand, through a cousin of Ashley's who still speaks to me, that the lawyer Trevor hired to file the conservatorship petition withdrew from the case entirely, once he learned the underlying medical evaluation was fraudulent, and that Trevor's real estate business, the one I'd floated $40,000 into 2 years earlier, without ever seeing a cent returned, formally dissolved before the end of that year. Ashley has texted me 4 times since that Sunday. I've read every message. I haven't answered any of them yet. Not out of cruelty, and not because I've stopped loving my daughter. I don't think a man ever really stops loving his child, no matter what they do. I haven't answered because Gerald tells me the DA's office is still deciding whether to pursue charges, and because some doors, once you understand what was waiting behind them, need to stay shut for a while before you can even think about whether to open them again. I still have my granddaughter Lily's drawings taped to my refrigerator, right next to Carol's old calendar. I look at them most mornings with my coffee. I don't know yet what kind of grandfather I get to be to that little girl going forward, and some nights that uncertainty sits heavier on me than anything else in this whole story. But I know this much for certain. I spent 38 years building something out of nothing, so that my daughter would never have to want for anything the way Carol and I once did. I gave her a house with my own 2 hands on land by a lake because her mother never got the one she dreamed about. And when the 2 people I trusted most in this world decided the quickest way to secure that gift permanently was to erase the man who built it, I didn't rage, and I didn't beg them to see reason. I just quietly, carefully, took back what was still legally mine to take, before they even knew there was anything left to lose. Love isn't measured by what we hand over, but by what we protect, including ourselves. Walter didn't stop being a father the day he took that house back. He simply refused to disappear quietly for anyone. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for the people we love is show them that generosity was never the same thing as surrender, and that a door closed gently can still open again someday. A small note for you. This story was written and imagined by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its life lesson still finds its way into your heart.